Awesome. Thank you, Helen. Thank you for the intro. As mentioned, we're excited to hold this monthly meetup or this first one of the year. And we will be today talking about more secure, quicker identity access management using verifiable credentials. And I am joined today by Mike Ebert from our enterprise software team, and also by Daniel Bloom from our enterprise foundations team. I'll introduce myself real quick and I'll hand off to them. But I'm James Schulte. I'm Vice President of Business Development here at Indicio. And if anytime after this call or during the call, if you have questions or want to talk more, please feel free to reach out to me and I can get you hooked up with the information or solutions that you need to get started on your projects. I'll hand off to Mike for an intro and then Daniel.
Alrighty, so I'm Mike Ebert. I'm the Director of Software Engineering at Indicio, and that means that I get to work with a bunch of engineers to build really cool stuff. So we are excited to share Proven Auth with you today. And Proven Auth came from the realization that we have verifiable credentials as a way to validate and then share data that can be trusted down the line by other parties. And that we also have all sorts of systems that depend on identity and access management, identity providers, that you're trying to figure out who's who and what they're allowed to do. And why not put those two together, that their powers and capabilities and benefits to both systems, and that they go together kind of like peanut butter and jelly. It's a match made in heaven, or chocolate and peanut butter if you prefer. So we're going to talk about what makes Proven Auth unique and useful. So there are three major benefits that I like to think of with a combination of credentials and identity access management. So there are platforms and systems out there that allow for single sign-on, right? So there's OIDC, OpenID Connect, and there's SAML. And those are two major ways to manage, access to your various services and platforms. And so if you already manage a bunch of systems with one of those two major systems, then we've set up Proven Auth to be able to plug into those. So maybe I'll chat with Daniel here a second. So Daniel, we talk about integrating credentials, and we already have existing identity access management tools. What do we do with Proven Auth to kind of cross the bridge between existing systems and the new world of credentials? And then we'll talk about what benefits that brings out in a minute. But what's kind of the idea there? How does that work?
Yeah, for sure. To just very briefly introduce myself, I'm Daniel Bloom, team lead of the foundations team here at Indicio. The Proven Auth project is something that kind of the running joke is that I was left alone unsupervised for a little bit too long, and this kind of came out of it as a result. So I've had the opportunity to work on this, and I think it's pretty cool. So excited to be able to share it with you guys today. Yeah, so how does Proven Auth bridge that gap? So OpenID Connect was kind of our first target for sign-on protocols. It's the ubiquitousness of OpenID Connect means that basically whatever language you're using, whatever website provider you're using, virtually all of them will have the capability to integrate with an OpenID Connect provider. However, on the other side of that coin, we've got the world of verifiable credentials. And I don't know if you've been paying attention for the past, I don't know, 3-4 years, but that has been changing and shifting quite a bit. There's lots of new protocols, lots of new credential types. Everybody's kind of vying for a position in that space. So what Proven Auth does is makes it so a traditional website with very little overhead, very little new things introduced into the stack can take advantage of verifiable credentials, delegating the responsibility of worrying about credential formats and the verifiable credential and presentation exchange protocols being used to Proven Auth. And this allows us to tap into these existing credential ecosystems or create new credential ecosystems and take advantage of the security and efficiency of the verifiable credential ecosystem.
So basically, you've built an add-on or an integration so that folks who are already familiar with OIDC or SAML and their identity tools can add credentials to the mix without having to code all of that implementation themselves, right?
Exactly. The setup process is relatively quick and painless, and it's a very easy end to the verifiable credential ecosystem, while also taking advantage of that ecosystem to do something that has traditionally been really painful and really inconvenient for website owners to do, which is user management, identity access management, that whole thing. So yeah.
I just want to take it back a step real quick. So, and this might be a softball question for you both, but why would an organization potentially be interested in using a verifiable credential as part of their login instead of something like a username or password like people have done for a long time?
That's a good reminder. When two tech nerds start talking, sometimes we have to think about how to describe this in ways that are, what are the benefits, not just the feature of the technology. We're so excited to talk about the how. It's good to remember to talk about the why. So, when you are working with various systems, sometimes you've got one system that says I want to utilize a username and password, and you have a different system that says we're going to work based on email and it's a different password, and you have a two-factor authentication system for one that sends you a text message, and you have a two-factor authentication system for another that sends you an email, and another one requires authenticator, and so you have this whole soup of different tools and methods to access things. And it would be lovely to unify all of that. And it would be lovely to simplify all of that. So with Proven Auth and the credentials, credentials are a natural match for a lot of purposes. So let's say you're a company. A lot of people have a company or an organization that behaves like a company. And you have a list of employees, and you want those employees to be able to prove that they're an employee, to be able to access the tools that they need to access, and you want to make the process of doing so simple for them. So a verifiable credential is a great way to say, all right, I'm in this digital age, rather than giving you, a business card or a physical pass key or something like that. There's, may still be uses for those, but let's also, you're used to working with your phone and the apps on your phone. Let's give you a credential that you can store on your phone. And now let's see, it says I'm an employee of XYZ, and this is my role or position at this company or organization. And now let's explore the cool ways that you can use a credential like that. So, you could prove to a partner that you actually do work for this company. You could prove that, to a door key system that, you're an employee and that you should be able to get access. But when talking about all of your applications and your identity access management, now you have something that is natural to possess in a format that you're used to using all the time for other things anyway. It's on your phone, you like your phone. And now that you have this, we can tie it to the identity access management systems to get some of the benefit of simplification and easy workflows. So we're going to have a demo of this in a little bit, but imagine that you can present that credential to any one of the systems that you're supposed to log into. So you have a single sign-on, and then you no longer have to remember your username and password, because the credential represents who you are and that you should have access to the system. And then you've been able to unify your approach to the second or multi-factor authentication, because you have one tool to do it. So you get to, so the benefit is that you get to simplify and unify all these workflows in a way that's natural and ties to other things that you'll get to do with an employee credential. It becomes kind of a central touch point that unifies your experience and simplifies things for your employees. We'll go into some of the details of each of those pieces, the multi-factor auth, the single sign-on, the security benefits, et cetera. We'll go into the details of that in a bit, but that's kind of the summary.
No, it's a fantastic summary, and I think one of the things that was implied by your explanation was that it makes it possible for external credentials to be introduced to be used for things like login. Obviously, there needs to be that trust relationship between the verifier side accepting the credential. But let's say, for example, there's a credential that another party has issued me that I could then use to log into another system given that that system has a trusting relationship with that other party or the issuer of my credentials. So there's that portability aspect that comes in, which is really nice when you get into those ecosystems that you had hinted at a little bit earlier. So
Yeah,
uh,
like for example, let's say there's a certification that is required. It's like, okay, I am an employee, but in order to enter the sensitive area of our data center, I need to have a particular network administration credential to show that, I operate at a level of expertise that allows me access to that sensitive area. Or if you were in a hospital, you could say, yeah, you're an employee and you have the role of um, of an equipment operator, like let's say you're an ultrasound tech or something like that, but maybe you need an additional clearance to do something sensitive. And so you could have, like you said, you could rely on those external credentials for internal purposes if you wanted to. And
Mhm.
sorry, I cut you off. You were going to say something else.
No, that makes perfect sense. I like that you touched on the combination with like a rules engine or a policy-based engine, which is what makes proven auth so powerful. So, for example, Amazon verified or verifiable permissions (AVP) or something like that, Abacus engine, which is an emerging one. But yeah, if you could talk a little bit more about that combination of the integration. Of proven auth into an IAM or into an SSO type protocol with a policy engine, what role the policy engine plays, and what that opens up for an organization.
Okay, so Daniel, correct me if I'm wrong, but the one of the key jobs of proven auth is to take the information that is in a credential or credentials and match it to the access or permissions um, on the application side. And sometimes those decisions, the code to do that is relatively straightforward, right? Sometimes it's all you need to be is merely be an employee of an organization. All you have to have is a credential, and maybe that credential contains your username and it's a linear one-to-one matchup, and you're like, okay, ta-da, I'm done. In other situations, it gets to be a little more complicated, where if you have a selection of credentials or um, you have one system that depends on different identifiers than a different system, suddenly you have questions to ask to say, in order to access this system, we need to match up the data in this credential via some kind of rule, right? A policy that says, um, if you have, this employee name or this employee role, then for this system that matches to this particular user role. So it's like if I'm a developer, then that matches to the admin of the IT system. But if I'm not a developer, then it doesn't match to the admin of the IT system. It matches to a user only. So some of those rules get to be a little more complicated. And you could, and in a lot of cases, people have hard coded those rules that match, a credential's attributes to the, the access to the system. But that gets cumbersome really fast as the number of parties, the number of systems involved increases and the number of users increases. You end up with, end-to-end explosion of special logic to handle that. If you have a policy engine, then you have a uniform interface for proven auth to ask, to provide these kind of attributes from a credential and say, okay, policy engine, go run through all the rules and come back to me with a yes or no answer. And, tell me what I need in order to feed this into the identity system. And if you have a uniform interface between the policy engine and proven auth, and between proven auth and the identity, the systems you're trying to access, then all of that complicated special business logic, instead of being code, it suddenly becomes effectively a configuration inside of your policy engine. You create the policies, you delete the policies, you edit the policies as needed, and then the systems involved just ask each other questions and get answers and do what they need to through a fixed and limited and understood interface. Any corrections to that, Daniel?
No, I think that was perfect. If I were to just restate it in perhaps a few fewer terms, the policy engine makes it possible for us to take any type of credential and then ultimately transform it into what our website needs in order to, you know, at a granular level, grant access to portions of the website or functions of the website. So, yeah, it's the secret sauce, if you will, the magic words that help get us from having a credential which could potentially be used or typically intended for a different use case, but then, according to who trusts who in that ecosystem, be able to use it for login to a website and say that because this credential is presented, they should have these permissions on this website. So yeah, for sure.
Appreciate the too long didn't listen. I was kind of thinking on my feet, so I appreciate the summary. That's awesome.
Yeah, of course.
So before we go into the demo, another question for both of you here, and maybe the first one is for Daniel, and the second part of it is for Mike. So Daniel, for an organization, what would you say the upside of the proven auth integration is for them, for the developers that are setting it up, getting it ready for their enterprise to use? And then Mike, what would you say the upside is for the end users or customers that would be on the experience side of it, so to say?
Yeah, for sure. So the main upside for the developers, those who have to worry about setting it up, for the enterprise is just the simplicity of it. Going through the process of integrating proven auth into an existing website is just dead simple. I'll walk you through what that process looks like for like WordPress, just as a quick example when we go through the demo. But it's, you have to know what you're doing, sure. You can't just it's not going to just magically appear in front of you. But the overhead is extremely low. So in a process where managing users, managing user databases, worrying about password policies, worrying about all these security vulnerabilities that are possible, and making sure that you've accounted for all those, generates a lot of overhead in an enterprise. That has to manage a bunch of different tools and websites for its employees or even for like a really small website that just wants to, I don't know, enable commenting on like a blog post. Just having a credential-based sign-in system means that the owner of that blog site doesn't need to maintain usernames and passwords, a database of people who've commented. They can just come and present a credential, piggybacking off of an external credentialing system, and just get to the point of authenticated users very quickly and very easily. So that's the main upside in my mind, at least from the enterprise perspective. Maybe Mike has some other thoughts that he wants to add on there, but yeah.
Yeah, so from the developer side, that's exactly right. There are, there's an additional benefit for the organization as a whole, which is that by controlling your identity provider, you're keeping your login and activity data internal to your company rather than relying on an external SSO provider. Maybe you don't necessarily want some big tech organization looking into what systems people are logging into or who's doing it. And so you get to keep that data internal to your company. And so that's another extra benefit for the organization. So great summary there, Daniel. And then to address James's second question, what are the benefits for the user? I think that speed and simplicity are the biggest benefits. So, with proven auth, you'll have a wallet on your phone that contains that credential. And the process to logging into all of the systems that are integrated with Proven Auth will be the same. And you won't have to remember or use a password. So no more having to worry about a password manager. And um, and then the second factor of authentication is built into the workflow. So no, you don't have to switch to your texting app or your email or your authenticator app or a separate key or whatever. It's in the same flow of logging in. So the typical flow looks like the app or service you want to log into provides you with a QR code that contains a link. You use the mobile application that has your wallet and your credential in it to scan that QR code, and that connects you to the system. The system asks you for your credential, and then you present the credential. And if the credential matches you up to some access that you're allowed to have, then it logs you into the system. And um, that's really quick and easy. And because it's just a couple steps, and you don't have to switch between all these tools. The other thing is that the second factor of authentication is tied to the app. In order to open the app, you have to know your PIN code or use your fingerprint or your face. That's really quick and easy to provide that second factor. So you need to know a passcode or have the right finger or face, and you have to have the credentials. There's two factors. And but it's tied to just one workflow. The other thing that we're working on is that a lot of the identity providers offer session management, so that once you log into the first tool in your suite of services that you're trying to access, the identity provider, Proven Auth, will keep track of your session, so that when you go to the second or the third or the fifth or the 10th, you don't even have to log in again within the configurations of how long your session lasts. So again, to summarize, the too long didn't listen. The benefits are speed and simplicity, and yeah, those are the two big ones there.
And I think we can all agree that we're all sick and tired of usernames and passwords from a user experience,
And
point
three or
of view.
four different multi-factor authentication schemes.
Right, right. I was at a conference not too long ago and I saw someone advertising four-factor authentication. And maybe there's cases where that is ideal, but it just made me a little sick. Um, but okay, there were a couple points in it that I want to touch on real quick, then we can go into the demo. But so you talked about that two-factor authentication happening within that one experience. So, opening up your wallet with your face, for example. So that introduces a biometrics aspect. So knowing that the wallet or the credential is biometrically bound to the holder of the credential, that brings in an elevated form of 2FA to any login type experience. So the security factor there is really interesting for enterprises to consider. Also, you'd mentioned that because the credential remains on the device of the end user, you don't have to rely on that third-party identity provider to store the username and password on their servers on your behalf, right? And that information would be potentially vulnerable to hacks on their servers. So it kind of eliminates that reliance on them. And I also had flashbacks there a second to, I think it was in 2021. I don't know if you all remember this, when login with Facebook went down for a day. So that federated identity service that Facebook provides, and WhatsApp crashed, Signal, or sorry, not Signal, Facebook Messenger, and a couple of the other Meta apps went down. And it really highlighted the vulnerability of using federated ID. So using a verifiable credential, you don't, even if a federated ID provider goes dark, you could use your credential to log in and bypass, given that that's integrated into the login capability there.
I think it's useful that you mentioned the spectrum of security requirements, right? So, for example, you mentioned the biometric binding. So there's the access to the application, which is tied to right now the default is to use the same biometric system that your phone's operating system is using. So if you've set up your fingerprint, it would use your fingerprint. If it wants to use, if you've set up Face ID, it would use your face. But you can go an extra step further, which is to say, this credential contains a copy of one of my biometrics, like, for example, an image of your face. And in order to proceed, you could configure your application to say, not only do you have to unlock this application with the same biometrics that unlock your device, but we can run a face match or a liveness check to say you are a real human and your face matches the credential. So that's an extra layer of security that you could add if you wanted to. That's not shipping out of the box, very first version. We're approaching this from the broadest applicability first, and then address the specialized cases later. So, but we've done authentication like that before, where you have to match the person using the device with the attributes from the credential to add that additional layer. So we've done it before. It's on the roadmap. We'll get there. So that's useful for people to know that there's a spectrum, right, where they can require, you can build a case that requires, like, if you wanted to, you could build an app that says, you know what, you don't need to authenticate to open the app. You just have to have the credential. You could go simpler, or you could go deeper to say, we're going to add on layers of authentication that are needed for this solution and still tie them to that one experience, but add extra factors to make it more secure.
Mhm. I'll give you a use case that I've discussed in the past with a cybersecurity company. They have a physical site, a physical location, and they have had external parties, foreign bad actors try to hack into their systems remotely. Even went as far as a foreign bad actor trying to purchase their building from under them without them knowing. Anyway, so they're obviously very paranoid for a lot of reasons. They have government contracts, so they are, trying to figure out how can we verify that the person accessing the workstation on site is who they say they are. As part of that, they want to integrate in a verified driver's license. And so being able to validate a document and biometrically bind it to the holder of the document and the wallet owner, that's a path that can be used. And then integrating with proven auth as part of their single sign-on, it adds those extra layers of security for that workstation login. So these are real use cases. But anyway, for the sake of time, I know Daniel has the demo of Proven Auth up and ready to go, so we'll hand off to him to share his screen, walk us through that, and yeah, we'll continue the discussion after that.
Cool. So I'll get my screen shared real fast here. Okay. And a quick check before I proceed. Is that looking okay to you guys?
I
That
can
looks
see it.
good. Yep.
Awesome. Okay. Cool. Okay. So as a quick outline of what I'm going to demo to you today. So we are going to go through issuance of a credential, since in order to sign in with a credential, you need a credential to start off with. Then we will run through a quick couple of slides just to view what the process looks like of setting up like a WordPress site for accepting proven auth. And then I will actually do the sign on and show you what that process looks like to sign into a WordPress website. So today, to do the issuance, I'm going to use an instance of Proven that we have spun up here. I'm just going to be using the administrative UI to issue this credential. Typically, this wouldn't be the way that you're most likely going to be interacting with the holders of credentials in your ecosystem. You're either going to use the Proven API, or you might be using an existing set of credentials in your ecosystem. But today, I'm going to be doing just a manual issuance with the UI provided by Proven. I do want to give you a bit of an idea of what this might look like in practice, in an actual website, which is a little ironic I say that because I'm actually going to demonstrate this with a very much fake website, but try to demonstrate the flow a little bit and what this might look like. So supposing we had some hypothetical company here called Acme Co. And Acme keeps track of its employees, provides a sign-on, a login, for them to be able to access tools that enable them to do their job. So Alice comes to the Acme website at the beginning of her workday, signs in by clicking the login button. And then Alice gets taken to, the stereotypical like username, password prompt here, um, into which she enters her email and password. Um, but after she successfully logs in, her account page might present this prompt here that says, would you like to enable signing in with a credential on your next login? So if Alice says yes, then she gets presented with a QR code that she can scan to receive a credential. And then the next time she signs in, she can use a credential rather than her username and password. So that's just one example flow that you might encounter. Um, if you have an existing username and password system, you can bootstrap into credentials very easily, very simply, by taking that data from your database and then turning it into a credential. Another case is just one to pull out of my hat, is if you have a government website and they want to enable login with a driver's license that has been issued by their state. The DMV is obviously going to handle the issuance of the credential, and so the government site is just going to integrate into that credential setup already established with the DMV. Okay, so now that we've talked through that, I'm now going to do a quick issuance to my Holder Plus wallet here. The credential that we're going to issue today is very straightforward. We were talking about policy engines and the ability to match complex credentials against the expected ID token claims in the OpenID Connect protocol. Our credential today is going to be on the simpler end of that spectrum. It's basically going to contain one-to-one the expected claims that will be presented in the ID token. And this matches well with our Acme Co example that we gave because they're coming from a username password system. They can just use the same type of information that's already available to them in their database. So my preferred username, I'm going to put that in, email. I'll give myself sure admin roles on this one. And then I'll set my first name and last name. And then we'll take care of the issuance of this credential here. So as soon as that arrives, we can click it open. We can look at what values are available within it. We see all those values that we just entered into that form, so I'll go ahead and accept. Okay, and then we will get that credential here momentarily. So that's the issuance process when it looks like when you're going through this manually and proven. But again, you're far more likely to do this through an API integrated into some other system.
Should be in your wallet, right? If you go click on wallet.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah, there it is. Cool.
Indeed. Cool. Okay. So we have our user ID credential. We now have the capability to sign into a website that has been configured to accept that. So I'm just going to very quickly step you through what setting up OpenID Connect looks like in a system like WordPress, just to give you an idea of how simple this process is, what it might look like in your system. Just to emphasize the process here. So with WordPress, in case you're unfamiliar, there is a gigantic number of plugins available for WordPress. And among those plugins, there are several for OpenID Connect. So you can pick your favorite OpenID Connect plugin. In this example, we just used the first one that comes up by Mini Orange. And once we install the plugin, we are prompted to add a new application to use for single sign-on. So clicking on that Add New Application button, we get taken to a page where we have a whole bunch of different OpenID Connect providers. These are from the traditional federated ID world. We will be using the custom OpenID Connect app, which takes us to a form where we enter in the key details that we need in order to access and use Provenauth from our WordPress site. So we provide a name, we provide a callback URL. In this case, this screenshot that I took was from just a locally running instance, so it's not the most interesting URL here, but this would typically be like, https://mywordpresssite.com, and then you'd provide a client ID and secret. These are both generated by Provenauth during client registration. So there's a process here that I haven't shown, of configuring the WordPress client on Proven Auth. We provide a set of scopes with a minimum of OpenID, and then provide the authorization endpoint and a token endpoint. And these are going to be well-known values according to what you've provided or how you've set up your Proven Auth instance. So after we do that, the WordPress plugin that we're using will actually go through a test where it automatically detects which claims are available in the ID token returned by this provider, which means it'll actually run through a test sign-in process. So we get this pop-up that comes up that we then scan with a quick admin user to get it set up. We see the presentation complete, and then we see the test configuration. These are the actual claims provided in the ID token. And then the plugin maps those to what WordPress is expecting in this case, which I think it's mostly just pulling out the, let's see, I'll go back here for a second, preferred username, given name, family name, email, those values. Okay. Then when we return to the login screen for that WordPress site, we get a new button on our login form that allows us to log in with the Proven Auth. So that's what the configuration process looks like. I'm actually going to hop over to this demo WordPress site that we have spun up here, and I'm going to actually go through that presentation process. So we have this login with Proven Auth button, which takes us to this page where we can scan this QR code with our Holder Plus app. We see that it is making a connection here in the background, and we get a presentation request. We can view the details, and we see that it's asking for this user ID credential with these attributes. So we accept the presentation request, our exchange completes, and then we're redirected to the WordPress homepage. We can see I'm now signed in with my username of dbloom, and we're into the site. As it happens, the plugin we're using doesn't allow you to do like admin user unless you pay for the plugin. We're not paying for the plugin right now, so this is just a quick demonstration. If we were paying, I'd be able to get in here and like adjust the admin, be able to install plugins, all that fancy stuff. But yeah, for the purposes of demonstration, this is what we get in our dashboard here. Yeah, let's see. I think that concludes the demo, unless James or Mike, you have anything else you would like me to highlight?
So the configuration process, let's say you had a dozen systems.
Yeah.
It should be relatively similar from one to another because a lot of those, the tokens and the endpoints and so on are going to be the same because you're integrating all of them with Proven Auth. And so a lot of the values are going to be same from one system to another, right?
Right, exactly. In fact, this form here that we presented from the WordPress demonstration, this is essentially exactly what you'd be putting into each of those systems. It's just a small set of information of providing the callback URL, client ID, client secret, scopes, authorization endpoint, token endpoint. So you just take those values, put them into each system that needs to integrate with Proven Auth, and then you're off to the races.
And those values come from Proven Auth. You do the Proven config and a Proven Auth config, and it gives them most of those to you.
Right. Yeah. So authorization endpoint, token endpoint, those are going to be static, unchanging for each client. Client ID and client secret will, of course, be unique per application. And callback URL is also a pointer to the URL on the client on the relying party that the login process redirects to.
Well, or some of the values are the same, and where the process for each of the systems is so similar, that really helps with quickly integrating a bunch of systems to use the same identity provider.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
What stands out to me is the speed at which you can get that set up even on the fly. As a non-developer, I mean, it comes across as fairly quick and simple to get up and going, and I think that's it's something enticing for enterprises that are looking to to start integrating verifiable credentials quickly. So that's what I'm particularly excited about with this.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
and from a customer user standpoint or user standpoint, um, the concept of scanning a QR code to log into something, it's not necessarily a new concept. A couple of months ago, I was in Singapore. Singapore, they use something called SingPass for citizens to access their government citizen portals, government services, where they scan a QR code to log in. But what makes this different is that incorporation of a verifiable credential and the flexibility and the other add-ons and features that can be added on to add the extra level of security. You had mentioned the example of a government, for example, wanting to or potentially using um, a driver's license credential as login. I'm curious what you both think as other use cases that excite you, particularly after seeing this demo and what it could be used for. Any that come to mind? You'd mentioned that this is great for like an employee internal use issuing credentials for admin and access. But I'm interested in other use cases that have come to mind as you've worked on this.
Other use cases.
So this is me putting my nerd hat on a little bit. So I admit this is probably not the most compelling use case, like in general. But so I'm being a nerd. I have my own set of websites that I run just like for my own personal use, and it would be great not to have to worry about maintaining usernames and passwords within my own systems. Like I'm the only one that's going to be really using these. I'm the only one that's going to be authenticating to them. I could like do things like lock it down in other ways, I suppose, but that harms the accessibility of my services. If I'm out of the house, I want to be able to hit these websites still. So what excites me about Proven Auth is that like um, as long as I'm willing to trust an existing ecosystem of credentials, heck, you could even use the driver's license. Maybe that's not ideal in all cases, and I think wallets associated with government credentials might actually like lock down who's actually permitted to request certain information. So that might not be an option to me as like the home lab developer or whatever. But having the ability to tie into existing credentialing ecosystems and just throw in proven auth to my infrastructure and then immediately be able to sign in without worrying about uh, username, password, maintenance, and management on my own services is kind of fun. So yeah, again, kind of a nerdy one, but yeah,
Well, I think it goes to show that this is not only great for large enterprises with lots of applications, but yeah, small businesses as well, or even private individuals managing different applications, different websites. So the scaling factor has a wide range of audience.
yeah,
Yeah,
for sure.
I think of my my least favorite login processes, and I just think, oh, if I could just replace that with this, it would be so much better. I won't name any names because I don't need to get on here and drag uh, other corporations for their systems or whatever. But there are a couple where it's just frustrating. And if I had, for my company systems or my personal systems, if I had control over what could be used to log in with, there's some that I would replace in a heartbeat.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Agreed.
So
Okay,
there's a
oh, go ahead, Daniel.
Yeah, there's. I think we're about to say the same thing. There's a really good question here from Gary DeBeer that I was wanting to pick up and address real fast. So his question is, do you support separate request templates per client ID? The answer is yes. So for each client, it follows that like for each system, each website, you might want to ask for different attributes for different credentials, depending on what the site is. So Proven Auth will support it's not going to be just one presentation request for all of the proven auth sites that are requesting. You can configure that on a per site, per client basis. Another great question from Gary that I can address here real fast is, does it replace the IAM or work as an upstream IDP as well? It should also be able to work as an upstream IDP, assuming your existing IAM. For example, Keycloak is able to integrate with an upstream IDP. So that's one of the things that we've talked about a lot, is maybe a system isn't ready to make the jump all the way to verifiable credentials exclusively for sign-in. So you can pair it with like Keycloak, which will do traditional username, password stuff, as well as email verification, all the things that you would typically want from that system. But then you can integrate Proven Auth with Keycloak. So when you go to the Keycloak sign-in page, you can have a button that says, sign in with credential using Proven Auth or something like that. And then ID token goes back to Keycloak, Keycloak authenticates, and ID token goes back to the running side. And yeah, Keycloak would, in fact, as you point out, manage the session in that case, generally speaking. Yeah.
Would this benefit remote workers? I think the answer is yes, because even more heavily than in-person workers, you have extra things to sign into. Instead of walking into your meeting room, you have to sign into your meeting room, for example. And then I think, would also help remote workers in the sense that it may help your employers or your whoever's you're working with or for, your partners as well, feel less concerned about opening up access, because they have more assurance that it is you, if you are using some of the additional biometrics or whatever to say this is definitely securely the person we want it to be. And so now we can trust that that's the right person accessing the system remotely. And so now we can open up that remote access because it's now trustworthy, whereas before there might have been doubts, and maybe they would want to require someone to come into the office. So the big benefit is the convenience when you have more things to log into. The extra benefit is you might be allowed to work from home more or remotely more because of the added security. The additional question from Helen here is, does this help with login security compliance, like the question about bad passwords? So if you read the statistics about passwords, there are some really simple passwords that are the most common. 1234 password as a password. You know, and trying to ask people, either you get dumb passwords or you require complicated passwords that people forget, and then they have to reset, and the frustration levels get high. And when you have to go through the reset process, sometimes that opens an additional attack vector or whatever. But if you have a credential, then credentials require endpoints that are clearly identified, and they use keys and encryption in a way that allows the common person to take advantage of the benefits of an encryption scheme and public-private key architecture, et cetera, without having to be a tech head to manage it. So instead of having to set a complicated password and remember or have a password manager for managing that complicated password, the keys that are associated with your credential function as that complicated password. And so you've avoided the problem of stupid passwords, of password resets, or managing complicated passwords.
So it sounds like it would, yeah, take a lot of heartache away from the IT department or the network security department having to deal with the employees that forgot their passwords or have compromised passwords, that type of thing.
Yeah, and heartache for everybody, because going through password resets is not fun. Chasing people to update their password or set a secure one is not fun. A lot of that is just, if you can avoid it, then avoid it, because it's just unneeded overhead if you can get away from it.
This is a point that I think has been touched on a little bit earlier, but just add one more emphasis to it. Using the public-private key infrastructure in a way that enables end users, people who aren't, crypto bros or tech savvy or whatever. It also means that the username and password isn't being stored by the website, where it's potentially vulnerable to data breaches. And then if you're using the same password across websites, which you shouldn't be using, then your information on other websites becomes vulnerable. And it's this cascading problem of just subsequent breaches and breaches into your data. So yeah, being able to take advantage of public key, private key, and all this cryptography in a way that that's never really been this accessible before, I think is really cool.
Yeah, it'll be exciting as as credentials become more commonplace. We'll be able to move from a credentials are an added feature to a credentials first kind of infrastructure, where it's like you start with a credential and that's how the system's architected, so that you don't even have the vulnerability of some of the older, less convenient, maybe even antiquated methods.
Mhm. Yeah, that brings up a point that I wanted to bring up a little bit earlier, but referring back to a Gartner report that came out, I believe August of last year, estimating that by 2026, 2027, there will be over 500 million users using verifiable credentials or verifiable claims um, out of digital wallets. So we're seeing that obviously with the European Union digital identity initiatives as more and more member states become issuers of credentials to digital wallets. There will be more credentials going around being used for all sorts of things, and absolutely certain that login to services, login to websites will be one of those use cases. So this is on track with that. This is a really really exciting timing for this type of technology. Seeing the way that governments and even the private sector are moving. Does anyone have any additional questions or thoughts? Feel free to come off of mute if you want to ask.
Yeah, actually, Gary here again. I'm going to push the bounds of technical question. Your platform supports CBA. Do you know what CBA is?
I am not familiar with that acronym.
Damn, where's my browser gone? I just looked it up. I just had to remind myself. I use the acronym, but it's OpenID Connect Client-Initiated Back-Channel Authentication. Usually used between two APIs where you don't have, or for an API to authenticate, where you don't have the ability to pass your browser session token backwards and forth, like you would with a interactive website. You have to
Right.
prompt the server to initiate a back-channel request and then gets the token with a direct callback rather than pass through a token through the browser session.
Gotcha. Yeah. Okay. We currently haven't targeted that, with our focus being on, having the ability to have an interactive session with an end user in the browser. But we're also certainly not opposed to implementing more of those sorts of authentication mechanisms. So, yeah, not currently something we've done, but something we could do.
I think it's supposed to provide OpenID with similarity functionality to a SAML back channel login. Anyway,
Right. Yeah, that makes sense.
I had fun experimenting with that and got it to work, so it's cool.
Nice.
Cool things happen when engineers start experimenting.
Yeah, I was telling Daniel that if this is the result of me leaving him unsupervised, then I need to leave him unsupervised a little more often.
Good,
I have a
cool.
question.
Go ahead, Michael.
Oh, thank you so much. I really enjoyed the presentation. So I have a startup for decentralized citizen identity, and we're hoping to cooperate with Mariana DeHaan. She has the Universal ID Council in Washington, D.C. And so my question is, I'm trying to learn everything I can about, verifying identities. And one company, and I have met with the original founder, Vinny Lingham of civic.com. So my question is, like, does Indicio, have you worked with civic.com, and how do you compare like what you all are doing, and is there a benefit to be had by like verifying somebody's identity beyond the government identity documents, like multiple other metrics? So
Okay,
so-
so I'm
go
sorry.
ahead, Mike. Oh, I can answer the first part. So we haven't worked with civic.com. I don't know much about them. But brief introduction. regarding Indicio is we provide the digital credentialing software infrastructure. So, the ability to take data about a person, an entity, an organization, and putting it in the form of essentially like a data container. Think of it like as a secure shipping container, and the information within it uh, is tamper resistant. So when it's opened on the receiving end, when being verified, you can tell if the data is in its original form from the issuing source, and you also verify the issuing source. Now, the data within a credential is only as good as the source of the data and where you got it from. So tying into your question about, is it required to use government documents as that source of information? It really depends on the use case, depending on the requirements of the industry. Financial industry, for example, typically requires government ID as that proof of identity. So, verifiable credentials in that context typically come from a government-backed ID. There are other cases where it doesn't necessarily need to be a government-backed ID. There's self-attested information. Um, Also alternative documents from organizations or certificates that don't necessarily come from the government. Does that make sense? Or Mike, anything you want to fill in there?
Yeah, so like James said, the credential infrastructure is the same, and then the identity verification that you put in front of it can vary from use case to use case. So civic.com is an example. You go through the process to get a mortgage, and your financial institution is going to be looking at records for employment history. They're going to look at your credit report. They're going to look at your criminal reports. There's some
Right.
concepts of looking at social networks and seeing, do you have a certain number of followers? There are all sorts of things that you can do with identity verification to pull the necessary data, feed it into a mechanism for passing it around, and then using those credentials or that data for the appropriate purpose. So some people are under the misconception that if you have a government ID, it's the magic hammer that will pound all nails. But it's not always appropriate. There are certain cases where you need different data types that don't come from the government, or where you don't need that level of assurance, where it's inappropriate to require someone's driver's license for a service. Like, if there are, if you just need a username to log into a web app that, let's say you're playing a game online or something like that, posting to a message board where authentication of your actual identity is not necessary, you really only need to prove that you're the same user coming back from time to time. You don't need to have your social security number, your date of birth, your height and weight, fed into a system like that. So, like James said, we haven't worked with civic.com specifically, but we have worked with a variety of sources for identity verification and identity data.
Yeah, it caught my attention because I saw that on Civic. I was kind of going through their presentation materials, and they produce, I guess, what's called Civic Auth. And so it sounded like what Proven is doing. So maybe what they're offering there, I'm trying to understand, is similar to what Proven is doing. Like, it creates a Proven Auth, or Civic creates a Civic Auth. And
yeah, our system, I don't know about Civic specifically, but we've tried to make our system open-ended enough that it's not fixed to one particular workflow for the identity verification process at the beginning. So Civic may have a very particular workflow in mind, and we've tried to set ours up so that it could be customized to accommodate different ones, where a government grade security clearance system is going to need government ID and a blood sample and 92 other things, whereas
right.
logging into your website might simply need to say I control a particular email address.
If I could do a quick follow-up, I don't want to take too much time, but question to you, Mike and James, is so I see that Indicio has worked with Mariana Dahan. Is there any progress, or is she building something to create this universal ID network? Because the United Nations 17 Sustainable Development Goals, number 16 is peace and justice, and she's worked with United Nations, and 16.9 is expressly calling for the creation of a universal ID system. So this means separate and totally decentralized and self-owned, self-sovereign, right? So that's kind of what the space that we are in. And so my question is, you got 850 million people in the world or more that have no identity documents whatsoever. So the idea of the Universal ID Council is to address that need and create a system where you can start assigning digital identities to, refugees or it could be homeless people in the United States that have no identity whatsoever. And so have you worked with her in Washington, D.C.? And where do we go from here?
We haven't worked with Mariana Dahan. I've heard her name, but we haven't worked with her. But I do agree with, this identity is a essentially key to participating in society.
Exactly.
Digital identity is a growing form of ID in the modern world, and a way to get the foundational documents to help individuals without those foundational IDs to start participating. So yeah, there are initiatives that are working on those types of initiatives. Um, yeah, there's a lot to do in that area. We believe that verifiable credentials are a fantastic mechanism for providing individuals those vital records or those foundational documents so that they can have control over their data and start participating in ways that get them the services and goods that they need to have a higher quality of life.
Thank you all so much for your time today. I want to make sure that we just wrap up because we're a few minutes over. The conversation, please keep it going. You can do it on the Meetup chat board there in meetup.com on the Indicio page. Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Daniel. Thank you, James. Thanks for everybody for your time today. Next month, the last Tuesday of the last Tuesday of February, we will have, I believe, one of an implementation of Proven out of Japan, working in education to show off and have them come and explain their use of open badges and in the education space in Japan. So I hope that you all can come and join us then. So stay on the lookout for that invitation. But with that, we'll let the call go. Thank you so much again for your time.